History often remembers the big players, the kings of England, the kings of France. Their names echo through the centuries, their battles filling our textbooks. But what if I told you there was another power, a dynasty that operated from the shadows, pulling the strings of kings and popes alike? They were not kings themselves, at least not officially. They were the Dukes of Burgundy. For a little over a century, these men built a state so powerful, so rich, and so glamorous that it threatened to eclipse both England and France. This is the story of how a family of ambitious dukes nearly carved out their own kingdom right in the heart of Europe. Their story begins not with a grand conquest, but with a gift. In 1363, the French king, Jean II, had a problem. The Duchy of Burgundy, a vital piece of land, had fallen back into his hands. He needed someone loyal, someone he could trust, to govern it. He chose his youngest and bravest son, Philip. Philip had earned his nickname, the Bold, fighting beside his father at the disastrous Battle of Poitiers. For his loyalty, he was handed the keys to Burgundy. Philip the Bold was a man who understood that power wasn't just won on the battlefield. It was built through shrewd alliances and, most importantly, marriage. He set his sights on the greatest heiress in all of Europe, Margaret of Flanders. She was the sole heir to a staggering collection of territories, including the incredibly wealthy counties of Flanders, Artois, and Nevers. These weren't just sleepy farmlands. These were the industrial heartlands of the medieval world, humming with the sound of looms and bustling with trade. The marriage in 1369 was more than a union of two people. It was the fusion of two worlds. Philip's Burgundian lands, known for their fine wines and strategic location, were now joined with the commercial might of the Low Countries. Suddenly, the Duke of Burgundy was no longer just a French prince with a provincial title. He was the lord of a sprawling domain that stretched from the hills of Dijon to the shores of the North Sea. He had wealth, he had land, and he had a burning ambition that would set his family on a collision course with the great powers of the age. The game had begun. The secret to Burgundy's incredible power wasn't found in a gold mine or a royal treasury. It was found in wool, specifically English wool, which was shipped across the Channel to the great cities of Flanders, Ghent, Bruges, and Ypres. Here, in workshops humming with activity, skilled weavers transformed that raw fleece into the finest cloth in Europe. This textile trade was the engine of the Burgundian economy, a source of unimaginable wealth that made its cities the envy of the world. It was a river of gold that flowed directly into the Duke's coffers, giving him a level of financial independence that kings could only dream of. This immense wealth allowed the Dukes of Burgundy to act like kings, even if they didn't wear a crown. While the King of France had to beg his nobles and subjects for money to fund his wars, the Duke of Burgundy had his own private income stream. He could raise armies, build fortresses, and fund a court of dazzling magnificence without asking anyone's permission. This financial freedom was the cornerstone of their political power. It meant they could pursue their own agenda, forging alliances and breaking them as they saw fit. They were beholden to no one, a rogue state hiding in plain sight. The Dukes of Burgundy had a clever strategy for building their empire. While other rulers relied on the bloody and expensive business of war, the Valois dukes preferred a different weapon, the marriage contract. They were masters of dynastic politics, meticulously planning weddings that would bring vast new territories under their control. Each generation expanded the family's holdings, not by conquering lands, but by inheriting them. They spun a web of vows and alliances that slowly and surely drew more and more of the Low Countries into their orbit. It was a patient, brilliant, and far less costly way to build a state. Philip the Bold had set the precedent with his game-changing marriage to Margaret of Flanders. His grandson, Philip the Good, perfected the art. He used his children like chess pieces in the great game of European politics. He married his sisters, Isabella and Anne, to the King of Portugal and the Duke of Bedford, regent of English-occupied France, respectively. These were not just family unions. They were powerful political statements that secured his borders and cemented his influence. He was weaving his family into the very fabric of European royalty, ensuring that Burgundy had a seat at every important table. This strategy was aimed at a single, audacious goal: the creation of a new Middle Kingdom. They envisioned a state that would stretch from Switzerland all the way to the North Sea, a powerful buffer state nestled between France and the Holy Roman Empire. This revived the ancient Carolingian kingdom of Lotharingia, a dream of a third great European power. The 100 Years' War between England and France was not just a clash of two kingdoms. It was, honestly, an opportunity. And no one understood this better than John the Fearless, Philip the Bold's successor. John was a man of cold, calculating ambition. He saw the war not as a threat, but as a ladder. With the French kingdom weakened by its struggle with England and a mentally unstable king, Charles VI, on the throne, a power vacuum had opened up at the heart of France. John intended to fill it, and, well, he was not afraid to get his hands dirty. His chief rival was his own cousin, Louis, Duke of Orleans, the king's brother. Louis was handsome, charismatic, and influential, controlling the royal government and the queen. John saw him as the single greatest obstacle to his ambitions. So, on a dark Parisian night in November 1407, he had him removed, permanently. Hired assassins ambushed Louis in the street and brutally murdered him. John didn't just admit to the crime, he openly and proudly justified it, commissioning a theologian to argue that tyrannicide was a righteous act. This was politics as blood sport, a shocking act that plunged France into chaos. The assassination of Louis of Orleans tore France apart. It triggered a brutal civil war between two factions, the Burgundians and the Armagnacs, who were loyal to the murdered duke. This internal conflict was a gift to the English. While the French nobility were busy slaughtering each other, King Henry V of England invaded, winning a spectacular victory at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. John the Fearless played a dangerous double game, sometimes hinting at support for the French crown, at other times openly allying with the English to crush his Armagnac enemies. John's own life, however, would end in violence, a perfect echo of the crime that had defined his career. In 1419, he agreed to meet the French Dauphin, the future Charles VII, on a bridge at Montereau to negotiate a truce. It was a trap. As he knelt to pledge his loyalty, he was struck down by the Dauphin's men, an act of revenge for the murder of Louis of Orleans. The assassination on the bridge did not end the conflict. It poured fuel on the fire. John's son and heir, Philip the Good, was now consumed by a desire for vengeance. He immediately forged a formal binding alliance with England, a decision that would change the course of the 100 Years' War. The alliance born from the blood on Montereau Bridge was a disaster for France. Philip the Good, the new Duke of Burgundy, threw his full military and economic might behind the English cause. In 1420, he was instrumental in forcing the Treaty of Troyes upon the mad French king Charles VI. This incredible treaty disinherited the Dauphin Charles and named Henry V of England as the heir to the French throne. It was the ultimate Burgundian power play. They couldn't be kings of France, so they would choose who was. For over a decade, the Anglo-Burgundian alliance seemed unstoppable. Together, their armies conquered almost all of northern France, including Paris itself. The Dauphin was forced to flee south, his cause appearing utterly hopeless. But alliances, especially those built on vengeance, are rarely permanent. By the 1430s, the situation had changed. Joan of Arc had appeared, miraculously reviving French morale and leading the Dauphin to his coronation as King Charles VII at Reims. Philip the Good, ever the pragmatist, began to reconsider his position. In 1435, Philip made a stunning reversal. He broke his alliance with England and reconciled with the man he had hated for 16 years, King Charles VII. The Treaty of Arras was a diplomatic earthquake. For the English, it was a catastrophic betrayal. They lost their most powerful ally, their financial backing, and their military advantage in one fell swoop. The story of Burgundy ends, as so many dynastic tales do, with an overreach. Philip the Good's son, Charles the Bold, inherited his father's lands, but none of his cunning. Where his predecessors had used diplomacy and marriage, Charles used brute force. He was obsessed with one thing, turning his magnificent duchy into a true kingdom, with himself as its crowned monarch. He poured Burgundy's immense wealth into constant warfare, trying to conquer the final pieces of territory, like Lorraine and Alsace, that would link his northern and southern lands into a single unbroken kingdom. His ambition, however, outstripped his ability. His aggressive expansionism alarmed his neighbors, particularly the famously formidable Swiss pikemen. In a series of disastrous battles, Charles's magnificent army was shattered by the disciplined Swiss infantry. In 1477, at the Battle of Nancy, Charles himself was killed. His body found days later, frozen in a ditch and partly eaten by wolves. It was a brutal and ignominious end for the last of the great Valois dukes. With his death, the dream of a Burgundian kingdom died too. He left behind only one heir, a daughter named Mary. The fall of Burgundy was as swift as its rise had been spectacular. The King of France immediately moved in, seizing the original Duchy of Burgundy itself and other French-speaking lands. But the story doesn't end there. The vast, wealthy territories of the Low Countries were saved for the dynasty through one final, brilliant marriage. Mary of Burgundy married Maximilian of Habsburg, the future Holy Roman Emperor. This single act transferred the entire Burgundian inheritance, its wealth, its culture, its sophisticated bureaucracy, into the hands of the Habsburg dynasty. This legacy transformed Europe. The Habsburgs, now lords of the richest lands in Europe, became the continent's dominant power for the next 2 centuries. The glittering court culture of Burgundy, with its elaborate etiquette and patronage of the arts, became the model for royal courts everywhere. The administrative systems pioneered by the dukes to govern their diverse territories laid the groundwork for the modern state. Though the Kingdom of Burgundy never officially existed, its ghost lived on. It shaped the balance of power, defined a new standard of royal splendor, and left an indelible mark on the art, culture, and politics of the world that followed.